Hello and welcome to Berlin's 96 localities. I am today in the very southwest of the city in Dahlem. And Dahlem is a very interesting locality because it's a mix of residential buildings, a lot of trees, it's almost like you're a bit in a forest, and interesting cultural and political landmarks. And one of them you can already see behind me. That's the Museum of the Allied Forces, the Alliierten Museum. So there is a huge plane that was delivering goods to the people in West Berlin during the late 1940s. And you know about this if you have watched my episode on Tempelhof. I think that this museum also features a few other interesting things. But I guess I won't have time to show you too much of it because the weather today is not too promising. So I will try to focus on a very few things, like the huge university complex of the Freie Universität, so the Free University of Berlin. And I also want to go to the Domäne Dahlem. That is some kind of a farm inside the city. Well, let's see how it turns out with the weather. And before I start my tour, you will have a look at the map.
Dahlem is located in the southwest of Berlin and it belongs to the district of Steglitz-Zehlendorf. 16,000 people live on an area of 8 square kilometers. And the distance to the city center is about 10 kilometers. The main transport route is the Underground Line 3, going all the way from the northeast to the southwest of the locality. You could split Dahlem roughly into 3 parts. The part east of the Underground Line contains many facilities of the Freie Universität. The part west of it is majorly a residential area. Finally, in the very west, about 1/3 of the locality is simply forest, part of the Grunewald.
So I am currently walking towards the Domäne Dahlem, so this sort of farm. And yeah, I thought a little bit about what Dahlem is for me. I haven't been here too often before, so maybe it's some sort of a mystic box or a black box, but from what I've seen or from my imagination, it was always sort of a locality of the very rich people. It was maybe the name of the most expensive quarter for me, even though that might not be true. There might be more expensive quarters around Berlin, but yeah, I think if you look at some of the houses, and I will show you some, you could still get an impression that residing here is something special. Yeah, I made it to the entrance of the Domäne Dahlem. You can see it in the background. Yeah, I already heard some thunder on my way. I hope it will just go away. But maybe even the sun will come out again. I don't know. It's a crazy day. However, so this Domäne, it's a very unusual word in German, Domäne. I think it's like domain from the internet, but has probably not much to do with it. It's rather some sort of a farm, and I haven't been here before inside. I've heard of it, of course, so I'm excited to find out what it will be like inside. If I can see some animals, if I can see some, I don't know, fruits and vegetables, I would say let's find out.
Unfortunately, I had to realize that it is not allowed to take videos or photos on the grounds of the Domäne Dahlem. It was rather disappointing being there anyway. You could see a couple of small meadows and patches of farmland. I didn't see any animals, however. I guess for kids that have never left the city that's alright, but for someone who grew up on the countryside, it's nothing special. Without being able to take footage, I quickly moved on. Nearby is an interesting old church, the St. Annenkirche. Its cemetery contains a gravestone dating back to the 18th century. It also possesses a memorial for the victims of the Holocaust and the Second World War in general. By accident, I found the graveyard of Rudi Dutschke, a central figure in the students' protests of the late 1960s, who was critically wounded and later died of the aftermath of the assault. I mentioned him in my episode on Kreuzberg, where a street bears his name. Besides the church, I saw some of my favorite underground stations of Berlin, with a lovely small-town style. A cool panda bear, and the monument The Day the Wall Came Down by Verrill Goodnight, presented to the public by the former US President George Bush Sr. in 1998, according to a plaque. It is also worth mentioning that Dahlem possesses one of the largest museum complexes of the city, if not the biggest one. However, a couple of years ago it was closed, and now it is waiting for a new purpose and probably some refurbishment.
I have reached the underground station Dahlemdorf, which is actually quite close to the Domäne Dahlem. And on the other side, right behind me, you could say, there is the beginning of the ground of the Freie Universität, so the Free University. And I mentioned earlier it's one of 2 or 3 large universities here in Berlin. I will tell you a bit more about the university later. But first, for orientation, there is an information terminal nearby, and I think that this is very helpful for both you and me to get an overview on this really large area.
The info terminal is quite cool. I have never seen something similar in Berlin before. It also possesses a Wi-Fi hotspot. Unfortunately though, the map stands on its head, with the north being at the bottom. So for orientation, I stick to my phone and to huge poles with arrows all over the quarter from a mostly analog era. I guess you could make a 1-hour video on the campus of the university without reaching its end. The main axis is almost 1 kilometer long, with half of it being completely connected. Different building materials like wood, steel and glass are used in rooms and buildings of different size and shapes. I felt like being on board of a huge spaceship. Weirdly, many faculties are in small old houses nearby. Adding a lot of trees that I mentioned in the beginning, it feels like that spaceship being stranded on the surface of a planet called Earth.
Yeah, I think it's time for me to call it a day because of the unstable weather conditions. Currently it's dry, but I think it's just a matter of time before it will continue, and I spent like 45 minutes or so inside of the university buildings just to wait for the heavy rain to stop. I think you enjoyed this tour nevertheless and got some interesting insights on Dahlem. I hope to see you soon on another tour, and yeah, for me it's just time to say goodbye and take care. Cheers.